Welcome to It's All Right with Suzette, a half-hour show devoted to the craft of writing. With politics dominating the airwaves, I've often wondered about the process of legislative writing. And today, we have a chance to get some questions answered. Who does the authoring? How long does it take? What's involved in the process of getting a bill enacted into legislation? And today we have an experienced legislator with answers. I want to welcome Walter F. Timilty, who is our Massachusetts state representative, who has served in the House of Representatives since 1999, representing Milton and Randolph. Thank you for being here today.
Suzette, thank you for having me. This is my pleasure.
It's great that you've taken time off from your crazy schedule to enlighten us about the process of legislative writing. So let's dive right in. With 30 minutes, this is going to be a crash course for all of us.
Sounds great.
Can you give us a summary of the process of from the time you have a concept for a bill or a piece of legislation to its enactment? What are some of the milestones along the way, the process?
Okay, well, the basics.
Yes.
Legislative ideas for proposals, if you will, can come in any number of ways. They can come from constituents who have a request. We are a state of free petition, which means the custom is that if a constituent requests that you file a piece of legislation, you should file it on behalf of the constituent.
I see. Okay.
That is a custom. It is not a law,
Yes.
but it is a custom. So we're a right of free petition state. So if a constituent comes to you, approaches you and makes a request, I believe it's incumbent upon myself, with some discretion,
Right.
to file that piece of legislative proposal for a constituent. There are other ways. I am a full-time legislator, so this is what I do.
Right.
7 days a week, almost 24 hours a day. So I'm constantly thinking of different ideas, different ways in which I can help Milton and Randolph to the best of my ability with legislation. So if that's the case, when that is the case, I huddle with friends, folks, constituents, bounce ideas, and then we get to work. We get to work in terms of drafting legislation.
And who does the drafting? Do you do the actual writing, or do you have people who help you? I know that in the appellate courts, oftentimes the justices will have an opinion and they will ask their clerks to draft it. How does that work in the legislation?
It varies from legislator to legislator. In my case, I have one legislative aide who does a wonderful job. We work as a team, so I do a great deal of the legislative writing and the drafting in conjunction with my legislative aide. We draft a legislative proposal to file, and we vet it with our House clerk.
How long?
Excuse me, House counsel.
House counsel.
Our attorneys.
How long is the process? And I know that it can vary. I mean, very controversial pieces of legislation could probably go on for years, perhaps.
Certainly.
But typically speaking, to enact a law, what's the time frame?
It varies. There are no time parameters, no time constraints, other than the fact that we operate in a 2-year legislative session. 2-year session, so if a bill is not brought to fruition and signed into law by the governor,
Yes.
the bill will die at the conclusion of a 2-year session. So we do have a 2-year time frame. Now, some legislative proposals I've seen enacted, and signed into law by a governor in 2-3 days.
Wow. Okay.
And there are also legislative proposals that may make it to fruition in the legislative process and signed into law by a governor that may take a year and a half.
I see.
And most legislative proposals never become law. The process was designed by the founders of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts to be very slow and deliberate and methodical.
Oh, really?
Very. It's a lot easier to oppose a legislative proposal successfully than it is to actually bring a legislative proposal to fruition and have it become law with a governor's signature.
I see. So to bring a legislative proposal into law, how much of it is the power of the writing itself versus the ability to bring people together to support it, or does it have?
It's a combination of the two.
It is.
I would say a unique combination of the two. The legislative writing is key. How you draft a legislative proposal, the common vernacular is bill.
Yes.
If it's a member of the House of Reps who authors a particular legislative proposal like myself, it will take on House bill with a number. If
I
a
see.
senator writes up a legislative proposal in conjunction with his staff and offers the proposal up, files it with the Senate clerk, it is referred to as Senate bill followed by the number.
Okay.
But the bill writing is very important because obviously if the bill is poorly written, the support will not follow.
I see.
The support will not. You can have the best legislative proposal in the world, but without the proper writing, the proper presentation of the writing, it's going to be very difficult to gain supporters early on in the process, which is key.
Now, I noticed that you are listed in various bills as the sponsor or the co-sponsor. What exactly does that mean?
In either case, you are a part of bringing that bill forward.
Okay.
The sponsor is the lead author of the bill.
Okay.
The lead author of the bill, and co-sponsors are individual legislators, be it reps, state representatives like myself or state senators, who come forth and sign on to the bill quite literally as a co-sponsor or make a request of the author to be signed on to it.
Do they take any part in actual drafting of the language?
They certainly can, depending on the lead sponsor.
I
The lead
see.
sponsor may draft it in conjunction with himself and his staff, or draft it himself solely by themselves. Certain lead sponsors may bring other co-sponsors into the drafting of the bill, meetings, tossing ideas around, give and take,
I see.
and may bring other co-sponsors in. So it's all very fluid. It's a very fluid process.
That's really an interesting collaboration, and it seems with so many members in the House, I would think that, are there like hundreds of bills that are getting sponsored all the time or being offered all the time?
Well, that's a very good question. Within a 2-year legislative session, there are roughly about 6,000 bills are filed.
6,000
Roughly.
bills.
Roughly. I don't have the exact number. But several thousands of bills per 2-year session.
And I would think that all of them don't get equal time. Some of them just get...
Absolutely. Absolutely. Many bills have hearings, which is all part of the legislative process. It's
Sure.
where the lion's share of legislative work is done.
Wow,
But not every bill has to have a hearing.
I see.
So most bills do not, the vast majority of bills do not become law. That is for sure.
Now, what do you feel in the writing process? What are some of the behind-the-scenes insights that the public isn't aware of? You know, I would think that in any writing process, it has its own set of challenges.
Certainly.
And so what do you feel some of the things are that the public's not aware of and should be aware of in that whole legislative writing process?
Well, right off the bat, a bill obviously is drafted.
Yes.
It's filed with, in my case, with the House clerk,
Yes,
senator with the Senate clerk. That is not the final tweaking of the bill. There is the opportunity to amend a bill
yes,
in committee, where I can, in conjunction with the committee staff, amend the bill. The committee staff, in conjunction with the chairman of the committee and the members of the committee, can amend it. I can propose amendments within the committee process. Also, the bill can be amended in third reading. In various stops along the process,
I see.
the
It's a very
legislative,
long
it can be
process.
amended, which obviously is legislative writing. And finally, if a bill makes it to the floor of the House for debate and a vote, after the last legislative hurdle in the House, for instance, before a bill makes it to the floor of the House is the Bills and Third Reading Committee. Bill can be amended there as well. Again, legislative writing. On the floor of the House, amendments can be offered by myself or other colleagues.
Yes.
So the process is very fluid. It is an inexact process, and there is writing, legislative writing, all along the way. So just when a bill's filed with the House clerk, that is not the end of the legislative writing, potentially, for a bill, if it is to become law.
I see. When I think of legislative writing, it sounds like such a complex process. Do attorneys have an advantage in being legislative writers? Or do you think anyone with a good writing ability could draft a bill?
Well, I think it's always an advantage to have a graduate degree in anything. Anybody with experience who is intelligent and willing to listen and engage in a give and take with his or her constituents and experts in the field, the chosen field,
Yes,
can be an excellent legislative writer.
that's fantastic.
But experience, obviously, is a big advantage.
You know, we only have like a couple of minutes before break, and I am very interested in the whole use of language and writing format, and maybe in the second half we can discuss some of those components.
Certainly, certainly.
Okay, well, in a moment, we're going to return with Walter F. Timilty, and he's talking to us today about the insights into legislative writing, and we will return after the break. So stay tuned on It's All Right with Suzette. And we're back with Walter Timilty, who's giving us insights today into legislative writing. You know, Walter, I view this kind of lawmaking process as something that most people are not familiar with at all. The inside mechanics of how it's done and the logistics. And, you know, you've been serving since 1999. So when you were a brand new legislator, can you talk a little bit about the learning curve and your experiences in getting up to speed as a bill writer?
Well, absolutely, Suzette. I had a stint as a legislative aide
Oh, okay.
prior to taking the oath of office to serve as our state representative here in Milton and Randolph. So I had some experience that I'm very proud of, working for the district. I was a legislative aide to a state representative, Joe Manning, who represented Milton and Randolph. So I had experience both with the district, being someone who moved into Milton when I was a year old, and I also had state house experience. So I knew what the people in Milton and Randolph were looking for, and I believe I still do today. And also, as far as the experience, the technical experience, I had some experience to start. And of course, I also knew who the people who had drafted legislation for many years were at the State House.
Oh, okay.
So I made sure to tap their knowledge, to talk to those folks, the men and women who've been drafting legislation for years, various committee staffers who are outstanding, to learn and dive right in.
I see.
You know, as a full-time state representative, you know, I have the time to do that.
Now, if you had not had that experience as a legislative aide, how difficult do you think it would have been to jump right in as a newly elected representative?
Difficult to be sure. A newly elected state representative or state senator, there's a huge learning curve. There's a huge learning curve which I believe delays your progress. Delays your progress as a legislator. You have to learn, and you have to take a lot of time to learn.
I see.
In my case as a state representative, and of course it's even more so today, I was ready to hit the ground running.
Is there a, you know, like a template for creating bills? Do you use a particular writing format? Like, for instance, you know, I have my experience in the legal field, and they put out the big question, and then the points of memorandum cover the support of a particular position, a legal position. Is it similar in bill writing that there is kind of a format that you follow?
Well, one of the great things about Massachusetts state government, and there are many great things, we have a wealth of history. And that history legislatively is right there for us.
Okay.
And that history can be tapped into at a moment's notice.
I see.
When we're getting ready to write bills, when bills are in the production phase, if you will, for lack of a better term. So as I just mentioned a second ago, the history is there, it's well documented legislatively, and it is often used as we progress forward as a Commonwealth.
I see. Can you maybe share some of your experiences in obstacles that you had to overcome? And I understand that when one is creating or drafting a bill, no matter how much support you have, there's always going to be opposition and all
part
those
of a
kind
democracy.
of things. Right, part of a democracy, opposition, external forces and factors that you have no control over.
Absolutely.
But could you maybe share some of those with us to kind of give the viewers an idea of what's involved when you're trying to get a bill passed?
Well, certainly. As a state representative or a state senator, and I'm going to what I'm about to say may sound rather simplistic, but it is true. We are not in executive positions. Everything we do legislatively involves building coalitions.
I see.
Building coalitions. They could be small coalitions, large coalitions, hopefully, Bills can be mundane, they can be extremely complex. So it involves bringing coalitions together.
Yes.
But some of the things that we deal with, you have various competing interests. Your constituency may have different opinions. Quite often, constituencies do have different opinions as to which way they want their state representative or state senator to proceed. You also have the media. Media has views. Everybody's human.
Yes.
People in the media, newspapers do editorials. Electronic media, they have verbal editorials.
Yes.
So there are competing interests, both in the Fourth Estate and in the general public, and there are competing interests within the legislative bodies. So you have to try to bring people together as best you can, and you're not going to be able to bring all entities and all people together. That is impossible. It's just not human nature. But in a democracy, it's a majority of the folks, a majority of the people in your district, and of course within the legislature. To actually get a bill to the governor's desk, you need a majority in each chamber, 160 state representatives, 40 state senators. On most things, there are certain votes that require a 2/3 vote. But for most, it's just a simple plurality.
I see.
So you have, right off the bat, you have to deal with competing interests. And the competing interests, most of the time, the vast majority of the time, are civil. Thankfully, we have the best system in the world, and we have a wonderful system in place in this Commonwealth. But you have competing interests right off the bat. But as far as legislative writing goes, when you draft up a proposal, you try to bring as many people in with you. And that involves meeting with folks, meeting with constituents, meeting with colleagues, tossing around ideas, and putting together the best piece of legislation, the best legislative proposal possible. And of course, early on in the process, co-sponsors are a big help to show support for a bill. It also gains attention to what you're proposing.
I see.
You know, if a lot of people are willing to put their name on a bill, people take notice and people realize that it's a legitimate proposal and should get a great hearing going forward and proper consideration.
And do you have some, say, stories or examples of things that you've worked on that you hit road bumps along the way before it finally came to fruition?
Absolutely, absolutely. We all hit many road bumps along the way. Several years ago, I filed both a legislative bill and ultimately an amendment to a budget proposal. There are several different vehicles in order to put forth a legislative proposal in writing. We talked about bills, and also we mentioned earlier amendments to various budget processes.
Okay.
Finally, one of my amendments to force the Department of Conservation and Recreation to maintain a mounted patrol unit in the Blue Hills was adopted during one particular budget process. And I did it for a couple of reasons. One was public safety, to have a mounted patrol unit in the Blue Hills that could access certain parts of the Blue Hills that are not accessible to vehicles. Obviously expands the coverage to protect hikers, to protect visitors to the Blue Hills, which is a wonderful treasure, our Blue Hills Reservation. And it was also environmental. Obviously, horses are environmentally friendly. ATVs, vehicles that burn fuel, emit fumes, are not friendly to any natural preserve. It was adopted. It became signed into law. The budget was signed into law, so it became law. The governor, this particular amendment became law, I should say. DCR didn't comply with it for several years. So it was part of a...
Even though it was enacted, but they didn't comply.
It was part of a budget. It was part of our budget. Now, this is going back in the Romney administration.
Yeah.
It was there. It was on the books. It was part of the Massachusetts general laws. And for several years, the law was flouted, in my estimation. But there isn't an enforcement mechanism for the legislature.
Oh,
We don't have an enforcement mechanism. Obviously, we have an attorney general as the chief law enforcement officer of the land, but there is no enforcement mechanism barring a lawsuit, and no one wins with litigation. And finally, when the Patrick administration took office in January of 2007, the commissioner of DCR said, we will comply with this. If we're to be a credible agency, we have to comply with the law.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's just an example of competing interests, pitfalls.
External circumstances.
External circumstances and competing agendas and different points of view.
I see.
Now, my point of view is not always right, that is for sure. I believe in my convictions, to be sure. Everybody has different points of view. I respect everybody's points of view. And I am not always right, and I am far from perfect. When someone makes a request of myself who's a constituent, thinks something's a good idea, I'm going to do my best to bring it forward to fruition.
I'm kind of curious, in the lawmaking process, and you're dealing with so many different personalities and all of that, what kind of traits do you have to draw on in order to withstand the storm of criticism or false allegations or all kinds of things? I mean, I find it to be I think that for anyone in a public field, it can be very debilitating. I'm a columnist. I don't consider myself a very divisive type of writer, but I have many colleagues who do investigative op-ed or whatever it might be, and the hate mail they get is debilitating. And I would think that in the realm of government, it's like that too.
It can be tough at times. It can definitely be tough, but the way I view things, Suzette, I'm privileged to serve the people of Milton and Randolph. I love what I do. I love to work for people and to help people. If I go out every single day and perform my duties to the best of my ability, if I'm straightforward with people and I treat people with respect and I conduct myself in a manner that brings credit to the people of Randolph and the people of Milton, I sleep well at night. I sleep well at night. And as long as I know that I'm giving my all every day, which I do every single day, and that I am straightforward with people and I do my very best to help people. Any criticisms that come my way, whether they be fair or unfair, I can live with because I love what I do.
About how much of a percentage of your time is devoted to drafting legislation, would you say? Because I know that there is a lot of collaborating with colleagues,
Certainly.
listening to the public, and all that kind of stuff. How much time do you devote, let's say, every week to drafting and writing and that whole process?
Well, it depends on the time of year during the legislative session. We operate under a 2-year legislative session.
Yes.
So at the outset, for instance, the session we're operating in right now,
Yes.
currently, we were sworn in January of 2015. Soon after the swearing in, there is a bill filing period. A bill filing with deadlines to meet.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
So
At the
bills
outset-
have to be within the 2-year limit.
They don't have to be,
Okay.
but there is a bill filing period at the outset of each session.
Okay.
So that 80% of your day, 90% of your day, getting your legislative proposals in order.
I see.
Of course, the big part of that is drafting them. Drafting them, vetting them with House counsel, vetting them with colleagues, professionals. I am far from all-knowing. I love to get different sets of eyes on a proposal, different opinions, especially from constituents, who I will never forget that I work for the people of Milton and Randolph. So right then and there, it's 80–90% of your time at the outset when you're drafting legislation. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, you're vetting the bills with attorneys from House counsel, attorneys from various committees that you believe the bill ultimately will wind up in a particular committee, where the lion's share of legislative work is done. So it's a big part of your day back then, literally 80–90%. After the bill filing period expires, you can still file legislation. It is then called a late file,
I see.
which makes it a much steeper hill to climb. As it will, you have to have concurrence from both in the House and Senate. It starts out as a House docket. All bills start out as a House docket for a representative, Senate docket for a senator.
I see.
Eventually, it receives a bill number, and it is assigned to a committee. But if it is a late file after the bill filing period, both the House and Senate have to concur to allow it out of the respective rules committees.
Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, but it sparked a question that I want to ask. Obviously, you worked as a legislative aide, and it gave you experience into
Yes.
the writing, and you were chosen because I would assume that you had a talent for the writing and all of that to help your legislator. How do you choose from a pool of people to help you to do the writing?
Well, right off the bat, we do most of our writing in-house in conjunction with my legislative aide and myself.
Okay.
And we have wonderful staff in House Legal Counsel.
Okay.
So first and foremost, our House Legal Counsel and the various assistant councils.
And when you come into that position, do you choose your staff or is it given to you?
We choose our staff.
Choose your staff.
We choose our staff.
Okay, all right.
We choose. We have that ability to appoint a legislative aide,
I see. I see.
and sometimes a administrative assistant. And a point earlier about the days. Most of what we do, the most obvious things we do are we debate in the House chamber, and we vote, and of course we draft legislation. But much of what we do is unseen. It's the committee work. The committee work. That, in committees, bills are brought forth for a hearing. Not all bills.
Yes.
There's a chairman, there are a chairman, chairwoman, co-chairs from the
Yes.
Senate and the House. People have the opportunity to come in and testify for or against bills.
I see.
Yeah, in opposition or in favor. And that is the first hurdle for a bill, right
see.
in the committee. And committee bills, of course, can be amended. And we have the opportunity to ask questions of the witnesses. So that's a big part of the legislative process right there. That's the first hurdle, the committee hearing. And after the committee hearing, bills can receive a favorable recommendation, which sends the bills on a bill on its way. It can receive an ought not to pass, which will pretty much will guarantee that a bill will not be passed into law. You can substitute a report with a favorable
I see.
on the floor of the House, but it's highly unlikely. Or a bill can be sent for further study,
Wow.
which again will make it highly unlikely that a bill will become law.
I know we could talk so much longer on this process
We
because
could.
it is really fascinating to get an insider's view of what goes on and what's involved in enacting bills. And talking to you, I really appreciate the time you've taken to enlighten us. And I can see that it's a pretty collaborative and complex process.
I would say collaborative, which is the essence of democracy, collaboration amongst citizens and amongst legislators, and complexity are two great descriptions of the process.
Well, I'd like to thank Representative Walter F. Timilty for being with us today on It's All Right with Suzette. It's been so enlightening. It's so rare to be able to get a chance to get this kind of information, and continued success to you.
Thank you, Suzette. It's my pleasure being here today. I look forward to coming back again.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time.